I received a text from my husband's number, but he died 3 years ago. The message said, "Check the oak tree." Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together, we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. The phone screen glowed in the darkness of my bedroom at 3:47 a.m. I had been awake for hours, as I often was, staring at the ceiling and counting the cracks in the plaster that looked like rivers on a map to nowhere. Sleep had become a stranger to me over the past 3 years, visiting only occasionally and never staying long enough. When the notification sound cut through the silence, my heart seized. Not because it was unusual to receive a message at this hour, but because of the name that appeared on my screen. David. My husband's name. My dead husband's name. I sat up so quickly that the room spun. My hands trembled as I reached for the phone, nearly dropping it twice before my fingers found purchase on the cold glass. The message preview showed on my lock screen, and I read it once, twice, 3 times, each reading making less sense than the last. Check the oak tree. That was all. 4 words that shouldn't exist, sent from a number that should have been disconnected years ago, from a man who was buried in Riverside Cemetery under a granite stone that read, "Beloved husband gone too soon." I want to tell you about David. I need you to understand what those 4 words meant, why they shattered and mended me in the same breath. But to do that, I have to go back to the beginning, to when he was alive and I was whole. We met on a Tuesday. I remember because I had been complaining all morning about how Tuesdays were the worst day of the week, worse than Mondays even, because at least Mondays had the energy of a fresh start. Tuesdays were just tired. I was in line at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place that spelled coffee with 2 F's and charged $7 for a latte. I was fumbling with my wallet, trying to pay with exact change because my card had been declined that morning, and I was too embarrassed to admit I had forgotten to transfer money between accounts. The coins kept slipping through my fingers, scattering across the counter, rolling onto the floor. Here, a hand appeared next to mine, placing a $20 bill on the counter. Get whatever she's having, and I'll take a black coffee. I looked up into the kindest brown eyes I had ever seen. He had dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, a crooked smile, and a navy blue sweater with a hole near the collar that he had clearly tried to hide under his jacket. You don't have to do that, I said, feeling my cheeks burn. I know, he replied, but Tuesdays are hard enough without coffee shop drama. I laughed, actually laughed, which felt like a small miracle because I had been going through one of those periods where everything felt heavy and gray. You heard that? I was behind you in line. For the record, I agree. Tuesdays are the worst. He extended his hand. David? Emma, I said, shaking it. His palm was warm, slightly calloused. Later, I would learn that was from woodworking, his hobby and passion. He made furniture in his garage, beautiful pieces that he sold at craft fairs on weekends. But in that moment, all I knew was that his handshake felt steady, genuine, like an anchor. We ended up sitting together at a corner table, our coffee growing cold as we talked. He was an architect, he told me, though he dreamed of making furniture full-time someday. He had a younger sister who lived in Portland, parents who called every Sunday without fail, and an irrational fear of elevators that stemmed from getting stuck in one as a child. I told him about my work as a librarian, how I loved the smell of old books, and the quiet satisfaction of helping someone find exactly what they were looking for. I told him about my own family, smaller and more fractured than his, and about how I had always wanted to travel, but never seemed to save enough money or gather enough courage. Where would you go? He asked. If you could go anywhere right now? Scotland, I said without hesitation. I want to see the Highlands, all those rolling green hills and ancient castles. It probably rains all the time, but I don't mind rain. Scotland, he repeated, like he was filing it away. That's specific. I like that. Most people say something vague like Europe. What about you? Honestly, nowhere. I mean, I like traveling fine, but my favorite place is probably my garage. Is that boring? No, I said, and I meant it. It's honest. We stayed until the barista started wiping down tables pointedly, giving us looks that said we had long overstayed our welcome. Outside, the evening had turned cool, and David offered to walk me to my car. This is me, I said, stopping in front of my ancient Honda with the dented bumper. This is a good car, he said seriously. A car with character. It's a piece of junk. Character, he insisted. Before I could talk myself out of it, I said, Would you want to do this again sometime? The coffee thing, I mean, not the spilling change everywhere thing. His smile was immediate and bright. I would love that. Actually, there's this place I want to show you, if you're free Saturday. That Saturday, he picked me up in his truck, an old Ford that was somehow even more beat up than my Honda, and drove us out of the city. We went north for about an hour, the buildings gradually giving way to fields and farms, until he turned down a dirt road I never would have noticed on my own. Where are we going? I asked. You'll see. He parked at the end of the road, where it opened into a small clearing. And there, standing alone in the middle of a field, was an oak tree. It was massive, easily 100 years old, with branches that spread out like arms welcoming the sky. Its leaves were just starting to turn, patches of gold among the green, and the trunk was so wide that it would take 3 people holding hands to circle it. This is it? I asked. This is it. He got out of the truck and walked toward the tree, and I followed. I found this place when I was in college. I was driving around, totally lost, trying to find my way back to campus after visiting a construction site for a project. I saw this tree and just had to stop. We stood beneath it, and I tilted my head back to look up through the canopy. The light filtered through the leaves in shifting patterns, and somewhere nearby, birds were singing. It's beautiful, I said. I come here when I need to think, when things feel too complicated or overwhelming. There's something about this tree. It's been here longer than any of us, you know? It'll be here long after we're gone. It makes everything else seem smaller somehow, more manageable. I looked at him, at the way the dappled sunlight played across his face, and something in my chest loosened and tightened at the same time. Thank you for sharing this with me, I said. He turned to me, and his expression was soft, almost vulnerable. I wanted you to see it. I don't know why, but I felt like you needed to. We stood there in comfortable silence, and then he reached out and took my hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental. His fingers laced through mine, warm and sure, and I felt something click into place, like a key turning in a lock I hadn't known existed. That was the beginning. Over the next few months, we fell into each other the way some people fall into sleep, gradually and then all at once. David had a way of making everything feel lighter, easier. With him, I laughed more than I had in years. We developed our own language, our own rituals. Every Sunday morning, we would go to the farmer's market and buy ingredients for a breakfast. We would cook together, usually making a complete mess of his kitchen. He was terrible at cracking eggs. There were always pieces of shell to fish out. I always burned the toast. Neither of us cared. On Wednesday evenings, he would come to the library right before closing time, and we would walk to a little Thai restaurant 2 blocks away. We always sat at the same table, always ordered the same things. Pad see ew for him, green curry for me, spring rolls to share. He had this habit of leaving little notes for me. I would find them everywhere, tucked into my coat pocket, slipped between the pages of whatever book I was reading, stuck to the bathroom mirror. They said things like, "You're my favorite person," and "Don't forget you're amazing." And once, memorably, "You snore like a tiny dragon, but I love you anyway." I did not snore. Probably. 6 months after that first coffee, he asked me to move in with him. Not at the coffee shop, thank God, but at the oak tree. He had driven us there at sunset, spread a blanket beneath the branches, and unpacked a basket with wine and cheese and strawberries. "I know it hasn't been that long," he said, "but I can't imagine my days without you in them. Not the mornings, not the evenings, none of it. Move in with me. Let's do this whole life thing together." "That's not a very romantic proposal," I teased, even though my heart was hammering. "Who said anything about a proposal?" He grinned. "I'm working up to that. But first, I need you to live with me so you can see all my annoying habits, like how I leave cabinet doors open and sing in the shower really badly. Full disclosure before I lock you down permanently. You're such a dork. Is that a yes?" "Yes. Obviously, yes." He kissed me then, under our tree, as the sun painted the sky orange and pink, and I felt more certain of anything than I had ever felt in my life. A year later, he proposed. Actually proposed, with a ring and everything, though it happened in the least romantic location imaginable, the produce section of a grocery store. We had been arguing, good-naturedly, about whether we needed to buy more bananas. I said yes. He said we still had some at home. I insisted they were too brown. He said brown bananas were perfect for banana bread. "You never make banana bread?" I pointed out. I could start. "You won't?" "I might." "You definitely won't." And then he got down on one knee, right there between the oranges and the apples, and said, "Marry me, and I promise to make you banana bread at least once a month for the rest of our lives." I laughed and cried at the same time. "You're proposing to me in a grocery store." "I know, but I had the ring in my pocket, and we were arguing about bananas, and suddenly I couldn't wait another second. Emma, I love you. I love arguing with you about produce. I love your terrible singing voice and the way you read the endings of books first, because you can't stand the suspense. I love that you still can't parallel park, and that you cry at commercials. I love you on your good days and your bad days and all the regular days in between. Marry me, please." "Yes," I managed through tears, "but I don't actually cry at commercials that often." "You cried at that one about the puppy in the tissue box literally last week. That was a very sad commercial." He slipped the ring on my finger, stood up, and kissed me, while a small crowd of shoppers applauded. The ring was simple, a silver band with a small diamond, and it was perfect. We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony with close friends and family. We couldn't afford anything elaborate, so we kept it simple. The reception was in David's parents' backyard. His sister made the cake. My best friend did my makeup. And for our first dance, David surprised me by having learned to waltz, even though he had 2 left feet and had always hated dancing. "You learned to waltz for me?" I whispered as we swayed together. "I'd learn anything for you," he said simply. Our honeymoon was a weekend trip to a cabin in the mountains because that's all we could manage with work and money. But it was perfect. We hiked during the day and sat by the fire at night, talking about our future, the house we would buy someday, the trip to Scotland we would take for our 10th anniversary. "Maybe kids," we said tentatively. "Not yet, but someday." We had so many somedays planned. The years that followed were ordinary in the best possible way. David got promoted at his architecture firm. I was made head librarian. We saved up and bought a small house with a garage that David immediately claimed as his workshop. We adopted a cat, a grumpy orange tabby we named Copernicus, who loved David and merely tolerated me. Every year on our anniversary, we would go back to the oak tree. We would bring a picnic, sit beneath its branches, and talk about our year. What had been hard? What had been good? What we wanted for the year ahead. On our 3rd anniversary, David brought a small sapling in a pot. "I want to plant this," he said. "Not here, obviously. This tree doesn't need our help, but at our house, so we can watch it grow together, so that when we're old and gray, we can sit under it and remember this tree, and remember right now." We planted it in the backyard that weekend. David built a little fence around it to protect it while it was young. We watered it faithfully. That tree, that tiny sapling, was one of the last things David and I did together. It was a Friday in March. David had taken the day off because he had been working too many late nights, and I had left work early, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely a lie. We decided to drive out to the oak tree, just because. No special occasion, no anniversary. We just wanted to. The sky was that particular shade of blue that only exists in early spring, clear and bright and full of promise. David was in a good mood, singing along badly to the radio, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. "Do you ever think about how lucky we are?" he asked suddenly. I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we found each other. Out of everyone in the world, we found each other in a coffee shop on a Tuesday. What are the odds?" "Pretty slim, I guess." "Exactly. We're lucky, Em. I want you to remember that." "Okay, weirdo," I said, laughing. "Why are you being so philosophical?" "I don't know. I've just been thinking lately about how quickly things can change, how we should appreciate what we have while we have it." "Well, I appreciate you," I said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "Even when you're being weird and sappy." He squeezed back. "I love you." "I love you too." Those were the last words I said to him. We never made it to the oak tree that day. A truck ran a red light at the intersection 5 miles from our house. The driver was texting, not paying attention, and he hit us on David's side, going 50 miles an hour. I remember the sound of metal crunching, glass shattering. I remember the way the world tilted and spun. I remember screaming David's name. And then nothing. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later with a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a fractured wrist. The doctor who told me about my injuries was kind but direct. She ran through the list of my damages efficiently, and then she paused. "Mrs. Harper," she said gently, "I'm so sorry, but your husband didn't survive the accident. The impact was on his side of the vehicle, and the injuries were too severe. They did everything they could, but he died at the scene." I don't remember what I said. I don't remember if I said anything at all. I remember the room feeling very cold, and I remember thinking that she must be wrong, that this was a mistake, that David was fine, and would walk through the door any second to tell everyone to stop being so dramatic. He didn't. The funeral was a blur. People came and said things that were probably meant to be comforting, but just sounded like noise. "He's in a better place. Time heals all wounds. At least he didn't suffer." I nodded and thanked them and felt absolutely nothing. His parents asked me where I wanted to bury him. I couldn't think. I couldn't decide. Finally, I said, "Near the oak tree, as close as we can get." We found a cemetery about 10 miles from the tree. It was the best we could do. I visited his grave every week for the first year, then every month, and now, 3 years later, every few months when the weight of not going became heavier than the weight of going. The house felt empty without him, too big and too quiet. Copernicus wandered around for weeks, looking for David, meowing plaintively. The cat lost weight, stopped playing. I understood completely. I couldn't go into David's workshop for the first year. I kept the door closed and pretended it didn't exist. When I finally opened it, the smell of sawdust and wood stain hit me like a physical blow. His tools were organized on the pegboard, exactly as he had left them. There was a piece of wood in the vise, half-carved, abandoned mid-creation. I closed the door again and didn't open it for another 6 months. People told me I should date again, that David would want me to be happy. His mother said it, his sister said it, my friends said it. I smiled and nodded and ignored them all. How could I even think about someone else when I was still so full of David? When I still slept on my side of the bed, leaving his side untouched? When I still cooked for 2 out of habit and then stared at the extra plate with confusion? I kept his phone number in my contacts. I knew it was disconnected. I had canceled his service after he died, but I couldn't make myself delete it. Sometimes late at night, I would scroll to his name and just look at it. David. Such a simple name. 4 letters that contained my entire world. I never called it. What would be the point? I kept his clothes in the closet his toothbrush by the sink. I watched our wedding video so many times that I memorized it, every word, every smile. I read through our old text messages until I could recite them. The mundane ones were somehow the worst. Don't forget milk, and running late, start dinner without me, and love you, see you soon, see you soon. The grief didn't get smaller, I learned. I just got bigger around it. Life continued in the mechanical way it does, days turning into weeks, turning into months. I went to work, I came home, I fed the cat. I watered David's tree, which had somehow survived and was actually growing, branches reaching toward the sky. And I was awake at 3:47 a.m. on a Thursday in late October when my phone lit up with a message from my dead husband's number. Check the oak tree. I stared at those 4 words until they stopped making sense, until they were just shapes on a screen. This had to be a mistake, a glitch. Someone had gotten his old number, maybe, and was texting the wrong person. But no, the message was clearly meant for me. The oak tree. Our oak tree. No stranger would know about that. My hands shook as I opened the full conversation. The message was there, sent at 3:47 a.m. from David's contact. I scrolled up through our old messages, through 3 years of silence, back to the last text he had sent me. It was from the morning of the accident, taking the day off. Let's do something fun, love you. And now, 3 years later, check the oak tree. I sat frozen in bed, my heart slamming against my ribs. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. People didn't get messages from dead people. There had to be an explanation. Someone was playing a cruel joke. Someone had accessed his old number somehow. This was a prank, a coincidence, a mistake. But the message said to check the oak tree. I should delete it, I thought. I should block the number. I should go back to sleep, and in the morning, this would all seem like a strange dream brought on by too little sleep and too much coffee before bed. Instead, I got out of bed. I dressed in the dark, pulling on jeans and a sweatshirt, not bothering with more than that. I grabbed my keys and my phone and walked out to my car, the same Honda with the dented bumper that David had called a car with character on the night we met. It started on the 3rd try, engine turning over reluctantly. The streets were empty at 4 in the morning. I drove north, away from the city, following a route I had taken 100 times. The route we always took to our tree. I shouldn't be doing this, I thought. I was going to drive an hour in the middle of the night because of a text message that made no sense. This was crazy. This was exactly the kind of thing people did in horror movies right before something terrible happened. But my hands stayed steady on the wheel, and my foot stayed pressed to the gas, and I kept driving. The sky was just beginning to lighten when I turned onto the dirt road. Dawn came early in October, the sun pushing weakly at the darkness, turning the sky from black to deep blue to pale gray. I parked at the end of the road, in the same spot where David always parked, and turned off the engine. Silence rushed in. I sat there for a long moment, working up the courage to get out of the car. What was I even looking for? What did I expect to find? And what if I found nothing? What if this was just my grief-broken brain playing tricks on me, making me see messages that weren't really there? But the phone in my pocket felt heavy with the weight of those 4 words. I got out of the car. The field was wet with dew, and my shoes were immediately soaked through. The grass whispered against my legs as I walked toward the oak tree, which loomed ahead, dark and massive against the gradually lightening sky. It looked the same as it always had, ancient and enduring, its branches spreading wide, its trunk thick and solid. I approached slowly, my breath coming fast and shallow. "Okay," I said aloud, my voice sounding strange in the pre-dawn quiet. "I'm here. I'm at the oak tree. Now what?" No answer, of course. Just the wind moving through the leaves, and somewhere distant, a bird beginning its morning song. I walked around the trunk, examining it, though I didn't know what I was looking for. The bark was rough under my hands, deeply furrowed and dark with age. I had touched this tree 100 times before, but I had never really looked at it, not like this. And then I saw it. Low on the trunk, about 2 feet from the ground, was a carving. It wasn't new. The bark had grown around it over time, making it almost invisible unless you knew to look. But in the growing light, I could just make out the letters. D plus E, David, and Emma. I fell to my knees. "When did you do this?" I whispered to the empty air. "When did you carve this?" I traced the letters with trembling fingers, feeling the grooves worn smooth by time and weather. And then, just below the carving, I noticed something else. A small hollow in the trunk, a natural gap where the bark had split and healed around something. I reached inside, my heart in my throat, and my fingers closed around something metal. I pulled it out. It was a small tin box, the kind that might have held mints once, now rusted at the edges and dented. I sat back on my heels and opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed and water-stained, but still intact, and something wrapped in cloth. I unfolded the paper first. The handwriting was David's, unmistakable, the same messy scrawl that had left me notes saying, "You're my favorite person." "Emma, if you're reading this, then I guess my weird paranoia was justified. I know you're going to make fun of me for this. You're probably rolling your eyes right now, calling me dramatic. That's okay. I've always been a little dramatic. I've been thinking a lot lately about time, about how we never know how much of it we have. I've been thinking about that night I couldn't sleep and ended up reading about this guy who died suddenly, and his wife found out afterward that he had been writing her letters for years, just in case. I thought that was both the saddest and the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. So I decided to do the same thing, not letters, plural, because, let's be honest, I'm not that organized. But one letter, one backup plan, one thing I need you to know, just in case. I'm leaving this at our tree because I can't think of anywhere more perfect. This is where I first knew I was going to spend my life with you. Do you remember? That first day I brought you here, I held your hand under these branches, and I thought, this is it. This is everything. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I hate that. I hate the idea of not being there with you, of missing out on all the some days we planned. Scotland, growing old together, sitting under our backyard tree. I hate that I'm going to miss it. But here's what I need you to know, Em. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Every single day with you was a gift. Even the hard days. Even the days we argued about stupid things like bananas and whether we needed new towels. Especially those days, actually, because they were proof that we were real, that we were building a life together. I need you to live. I don't mean just exist, going through the motions. I mean really live, laugh again, find joy again, travel to Scotland, and when you're standing in those highlands you always talked about, I hope you feel me there with you, cheering you on. I don't believe in much, but I believe in this. Love doesn't end. Not really. It changes shape, maybe, transforms into something else, but it doesn't just stop. I'll always love you, Emma. Always. Even from wherever I am now. And here's my last request. Don't wait for me. Don't put your life on hold. Don't turn me into a ghost that haunts you. I was here, we were happy, and now you get to keep being happy without me. That's not betrayal. That's honor. That's love. Under this letter, you'll find something I made for you. I was going to give it to you for Christmas, but I think this is better. I think this is where it's meant to be found. Live, Emma. Live for both of us. All my love, David P.S. You definitely do snore. I was crying before I finished reading, tears dripping onto the paper, smudging the ink. I clutched the letter to my chest and sobbed, great heaving gasps that seemed to come from somewhere deep and ancient inside me. He had known. Somehow, on some level, he had known to do this, to leave me this message, this gift. With shaking hands, I unwrapped the cloth bundle. It was a wooden bird, carved from oak, small enough to fit in my palm. The detail was incredible. Every feather was visible, individually carved, and the bird's head was tilted upward as if it was about to take flight. I turned it over and saw that David had burned words into the base. Keep flying, Em. I held the bird and cried under the oak tree as the sun rose, painting the sky gold and pink, the same colors it had been on the day David asked me to move in with him. And something inside me, something that had been clenched tight for 3 years, finally loosened. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for the sun to fully rise, long enough for the dew to dry on the grass, long enough for my tears to slow and then stop. When I finally stood up, my legs were stiff and my eyes were swollen, but I felt different. Lighter, maybe. Or maybe not lighter, but clearer. The grief was still there, still a heavy presence in my chest, but it had shifted somehow. David had left me a message. Not from beyond the grave, not in any supernatural sense, but from before. From when he was alive and thinking about the future, and worrying, in his characteristic way, about what would happen if he wasn't there. He had thought about me. He had carved our initials into our tree. He had written me a letter and carved me a bird and hidden them away, just in case. Just in case I needed to find them. I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the tin box, along with the wooden bird. I closed the box and held it against my heart. The text message. Someone must have somehow gotten his old number reassigned. Or maybe there was a glitch in the system. Or maybe it was simply the most meaningful coincidence of my life. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I had come here. I had found what I needed to find. I took a picture of our initials carved into the tree, then turned and walked back to my car. The drive home felt different. The world looked sharper somehow, more vivid. I noticed things I hadn't noticed on the drive out. The way the light fell across the fields, the brilliant orange and red of the changing leaves, a hawk circling overhead. When I got home, I went straight to David's workshop. I opened the door and walked inside, and this time, instead of closing it again, I left it open. I looked at his tools, at the half-finished project still clamped in the vise. I could sell these tools, I thought, or I could learn to use them. Over the next few weeks, I started small. I took the wooden bird David had carved me and placed it on my nightstand where I could see it every morning. I stopped sleeping only on my side of the bed. I donated most of David's clothes, but kept a few pieces, the ones that still smelled like him, and I folded them carefully and put them in a box in the closet. I called his mother for the first time in 6 months. We talked for an hour, both of us crying and laughing, remembering. I went back to the library and actually engaged with my coworkers instead of just going through the motions. I agreed to go to lunch with my friend Sarah, who had been trying to get me to go out for months. I started taking walks in the evening, just around the neighborhood, with Copernicus on a leash, because he was too old and lazy to wander off. The cat seemed happier somehow, or maybe I was just projecting. One Saturday, I drove to a bookstore and bought a travel guide to Scotland. It wasn't that the grief was gone. It wasn't even that it was less. But I was learning to carry it differently. I was learning that I could hold both things at once, the sadness of David being gone, and the gratitude that he had been here at all. A month after I found the box, I went to a hardware store and bought wood and tools. I signed up for a beginner's woodworking class at the community center. I was terrible at it. My cuts were crooked, my sanding was uneven, but I kept going. I was making a box. Nothing fancy, just a simple box with a lid. I was making it to hold David's letter and the wooden bird to keep them safe. The instructor, a woman in her 60s with sawdust perpetually in her hair, came over to check my progress. "Your first project?" she asked. "Yes. It's not bad. A little rough, but that's okay. Everything's rough the first time. What made you want to learn?" "My husband," I said, and was surprised by how easily the words came. "He was a woodworker. He died 3 years ago. I guess I wanted to understand something he loved." She nodded slowly. "That's a good reason. The best reason, maybe." I finished the box 2 weeks later. It was rough and imperfect, but it was mine. I put David's letter and the bird inside, along with a few other things. A photo of us under the oak tree, his wedding ring, a dried flower from my bouquet. I put the box on a shelf in the living room, somewhere I could see it, but not somewhere that dominated the space. And then I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I deleted David's number from my phone. Not because I was trying to forget him, not because I didn't love him anymore, but because I didn't need to keep his disconnected number like a talisman, like proof that he had existed. I had proof. I had memories. I had a letter and a carved bird and a box I made with my own hands. I had 3 years of marriage and countless more years of love that would never go away just because his number was deleted from my contacts. I hesitated with my finger over the delete button, and then I did it. The contact disappeared. I waited to feel something, some terrible sense of loss or regret, but I just felt tired and sad and, underneath all of that, the smallest sliver of peace. That night, I had a dream about David. We were standing under the oak tree, and he was smiling. "You found it," he said. "I found it," I agreed. "But David, how? How did you know I would need it?" "I didn't know. I just hoped, and I wanted to make sure you knew, just in case, that it's okay." "What's okay?" "All of it. Moving forward, being happy again, letting go a little." He reached out and touched my face, and his hand felt warm and real. "I love you, Em. I'll always love you. But you're allowed to keep living." "I know," I said, and realized that I meant it. "I'm learning." "Good." He smiled that crooked smile I loved. "And for the record, Scotland is beautiful. You should definitely go." "Maybe I will." "You will," he said with certainty. "You're braver than you think." I woke up with tears on my cheeks, but without the crushing weight that usually accompanied dreams of David. Instead, I felt calm, settled. I got out of bed and went to the window. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. In the backyard, I could see David's tree, our tree, now almost 10 feet tall, its branches swaying gently in the morning breeze. It had survived. Despite everything, despite my grief and neglect in those early months, despite the harsh winters and dry summers, it had survived and grown. Maybe I could too. 6 months after finding the letter, I booked a trip to Scotland. I told everyone I was doing it, partly because I needed the accountability, and partly because saying it out loud made it real. David's mother cried happy tears and hugged me tight. "He would be so proud of you," she whispered. His sister called me and said, "Send me pictures of everything. And Emma, I'm really glad you're doing this." Sarah offered to come with me, but I declined gently. "I think I need to do this alone," I said. "But thank you, really." The night before my flight, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling equal parts excited and terrified. I was really doing this. I was going to Scotland by myself, something the old Emma, the Emma from before David, never would have had the courage to do. I got up and went to the shelf where I kept the box. I opened it and took out David's letter, reading it again by lamplight. His words were as familiar to me now as my own thoughts. "Live, Emma. Live for both of us." "I'm trying," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm really trying." Scotland was everything I had imagined and more. The Highlands were impossibly green, rolling on forever under vast skies that shifted from sun to rain to sun again in the span of minutes. I stayed in small bed and breakfast, rented a car despite my terrible driving skills, and got lost on narrow roads that wound through valleys and along lochs. I visited castles and walked through ancient forests. I ate fish and chips in tiny seaside villages and drank whiskey in pubs with locals who had accents so thick I could barely understand them. I took 1,000 pictures and bought ridiculous souvenirs. And everywhere I went, I felt David with me. Not in a sad way, not like a ghost, but like a warm presence, an encouragement. I imagined what he would say about the landscapes, the food, the sheep that seemed to be everywhere. I could hear his voice in my head, making jokes, pointing things out, telling me I was doing great. On my last day in Scotland, I rented a car and drove out to a particularly remote spot in the Highlands, a place where the tour guide had promised the best views. I parked and hiked up a hill, my legs burning by the time I reached the top. The view was breathtaking, miles and miles of green hills, a silver lock in the distance, the sky impossibly big overhead. I stood there, wind whipping my hair, and I pulled out my phone. I took a picture, and then, on impulse, I opened my photos and scrolled back through the years. Past the pictures from this trip, past the occasional awkward selfies and photos of the cat, back and back until I found them. Pictures of David, pictures of us together, his smile, his hands, his messy hair, our wedding day, the oak tree, the sapling in our backyard, 1,000 captured moments. I looked at them for a long time, these frozen pieces of our life together, and then I looked up at the Scottish Highlands spread out before me. "I made it," I said out loud. "I'm here. I'm really here." The wind carried my words away, and somewhere in the distance, a bird called out, its song clear and bright. I closed my eyes and felt the sun on my face, felt the solid ground beneath my feet, felt the air moving in and out of my lungs. I was alive. I was here. And for the first time in 3 years, that felt like enough. When I got home, I hung my favorite photo from Scotland in the living room. It showed the view from that hilltop, all green and gold and blue, impossibly beautiful. Every time I looked at it, I felt a little spark of pride. I had done that. I had gone alone to a foreign country and navigated and survived and even thrived. I started saying yes to things. Coffee with coworkers, a book club that met at the library, a pottery class that I was predictably terrible at. I adopted a second cat, a young tabby that Copernicus tolerated with resigned dignity, and named her Scotia after Scotland. I went on a few dates, awkward first dates that mostly went nowhere, and that was okay. I wasn't looking for a replacement for David, because there was no such thing, but I was learning that my heart was bigger than I had thought, that it could hold memories of David and still have room for new experiences, new people, new possibilities. I visited the oak tree every few months. Sometimes I brought flowers. Sometimes I just sat beneath it and read or thought or did nothing at all. I always touched our carved initials before I left. A little ritual, a small acknowledgement. David's grave I visited less often, not because I loved him less, but because I realized he wasn't really there. He was in the oak tree and the letter and the carved bird. He was in our backyard tree and in my memories and in the way I had learned to be braver than I ever thought possible. 2 years after finding the letter, I was offered a promotion at work. It would mean more responsibility, more money, but also more stress and longer hours. The old Emma, the Emma from before the accident, would have agonized over the decision for weeks. I accepted it immediately. "Are you sure?" my boss asked, surprised by my quick decision. "Don't you want to think about it?" "I'm sure," I said. "Life's too short not to take chances." That night, I went home and sat in David's workshop, which was now my workshop. I had finished the beginner's class and moved on to intermediate. I was working on a chair, a project that was probably too ambitious for my skill level, but that I was determined to complete anyway. I ran my hand over the smooth wood, feeling the grain beneath my fingers, and thought about how much had changed. I had changed. The grief was still there, would always be there in some form, but it no longer defined me. It was part of my story, not the whole story. My phone buzzed with a text. Sarah asking if I wanted to meet for dinner. I typed back, "Yes, I'd love to." As I hit send, I thought about that text message from 3 years ago, the one that had come from David's old number. I had never figured out what had really happened, whether it was a glitch or a wrong number or simple coincidence. I had stopped trying to understand it. Sometimes I thought, the explanation doesn't matter. What matters is what we do with the inexplicable, the unexpected, the impossible moments that shake us out of our grief or our comfort or our carefully constructed numbness. That message had brought me to the oak tree. It had led me to David's letter, to his final gift, to permission I hadn't known I needed, but desperately did. Maybe that was enough. I finished up in the workshop and went inside. Scotia greeted me at the door, meowing loudly, while Copernicus watched from his perch on the couch with disdainful interest. I fed them both, then went to my room to get ready for dinner. As I passed the shelf with David's box, I stopped and opened it, something I did less and less often now. I took out the wooden bird and held it in my palm, feeling its familiar weight. "Keep flying, Em." "I am," I said softly. "I really am." I put the bird back, closed the box, and got ready to meet my friend. That night, over pasta and wine, Sarah said, "You seem happy. Really happy. Not just okay, but actually happy." "I think I am," I said, surprised to realize it was true. "I mean, I still have bad days. I still miss him. But yeah, I'm happy." "I'm proud of you," Sarah said. "You've come so far." I smiled. "Thanks. I'm kind of proud of me, too." Later, walking to my car under a sky full of stars, I thought about that. Pride. It was a strange emotion to associate with grief, with survival, with simply continuing to exist and eventually learning to live again. But it fit. I was proud of myself, for getting out of bed on the days when it felt impossible, for going to Scotland, for learning to make things with my hands, for opening my heart even a crack to the possibility of new joy, for not forgetting David, but also not living in the past. Before I got in my car, I looked up at the stars, countless and brilliant. "Thank you," I said to the universe, to David, to whatever force had led me to that oak tree on a dawn morning 3 years ago. "Thank you for the message. Thank you for the letter. Thank you for everything." The stars didn't answer, but I didn't need them to. I drove home through familiar streets, past the library where I worked, past the coffee shop where David and I had met a lifetime ago, past all the ordinary places that made up my life. When I got home, I didn't go straight to bed. Instead, I went to the backyard and stood beneath our tree, David's tree, looking up through its branches at the stars beyond. It had grown so much. It was strong now, sturdy, its trunk thick, and its branches reaching confidently toward the sky. In the spring, it would bloom. In the summer, it would provide shade. In the fall, its leaves would turn brilliant colors. In the winter, it would stand bare but resilient. It would continue to grow, to change, to survive, season after season, year after year. Just like me, I placed my hand on the trunk, feeling the rough bark beneath my palm, and closed my eyes. "I love you," I whispered. "I'll always love you. But I'm okay now. I'm going to be okay." The wind moved through the leaves, a gentle rustling that sounded almost like a response, almost like approval, almost like goodbye. Not a final goodbye. Just the kind of goodbye that means until next time, that acknowledges an ending while making space for what comes next. I stood there for a few more minutes, breathing in the cool night air, feeling the solid ground beneath my feet and the vast sky overhead, existing in that perfect moment between past and future, between grief and joy, between what was and what could be. Then I went inside, fed the cats, brushed my teeth, and went to bed. And for the first time in 3 years, I fell asleep quickly, peacefully, without the phone clutched in my hand or David's pillow hugged to my chest. I fell asleep like someone who had carried something heavy for a very long time and finally learned to set it down. Not forgotten, not discarded, just set down, carefully and with love, so that both hands could be free. Free to hold new things, free to build and create and reach out, free to keep flying. The next morning, I woke early to sunlight streaming through the window. I made coffee, fed the cats, and opened my laptop. I had been thinking about something for a while now, an idea that had been growing in the back of my mind. I opened a new document and started typing. The phone screen glowed in the darkness of my bedroom at 3:47 a.m. I was going to write it all down. The love story, the loss, the message, the oak tree, the letter. All of it. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I wanted to remember correctly. I wanted to honor what David and I had built together, and I wanted to document how I had found my way back to myself. Maybe I would share it someday. Maybe I wouldn't. That didn't matter. What mattered was this. I was writing again, creating again, living again. And somewhere, I like to think, David was smiling that crooked smile and saying, "That's my girl. I knew you could do it." 3 years ago, I received a text from my husband's number. He had died 3 years before that text arrived, and the message was impossible, inexplicable, miraculous. Check the oak tree. Those 4 words changed everything. They led me back to love, back to life, back to myself. They taught me that endings and beginnings can exist in the same moment, that grief and joy can coexist in the same heart, that the greatest act of love is sometimes letting go. David left me a message, carved initials into a tree, wrote me a letter, made me a bird, and told me to keep flying. So that's what I'm doing. I'm flying. And yes, David, wherever you are, I know. I definitely do snore.